Good afternoon, everybody. This is my first ever recorded conference, so I hope it will all work out fine. My topic today is the attitude of the communist Croatia/Yugoslavia towards the Jews in immediate post-war Croatia/Yugoslavia, and I'll explain very soon. I would like to show the history in a nutshell, a historical overview of the Jewish community in Croatia, to give just a context before going to the topic itself. We talk about relatively short history of a relatively small community. In general, we usually say it's a country where the permanent Jewish settlement started by the end of the 18th century. There are, however, two exemptions. It's the communities of Split and Dubrovnik that are as old as 16th century, if we talk about the permanent settlement that we can follow until today. It was under the context of Venetian or independent Dubrovnik Republic history. But when we talk about the majority of Jewish communities, and this is the story of northern Croatia, we talk about the permanent Jewish settlement from the end of the 18th century under the in the context of Emperor Joseph II, who tried to modernize his empire, giving then non-Catholic population toleration edicts, trying to make them also more quote-unquote useful. And this is where he issued different tolerance edicts or toleration patents. From that period on, we have the period of the path from toleration to emancipation that happened in Austria-Hungary then in 1867. In Croatia, it was a bit later, in 1873. Due to the autonomy Croatia had under Hungary, so it had to pass some laws through Croatian parliament. It just took time. This is the map of Austria-Hungary, and we can see that the majority of Croatian territory is in yellow, in a part in Hungarian half of the monarchy, while southern Croatia, Dalmatia, is part of the Austrian half of the monarchy. And here we can see Bosnia and Herzegovina in green, that was first occupied in 1878 by the Austro-Hungarian monarchy and then annexed in 1908. So here we have mostly Ashkenazi Jews settling then to Croatia as well, while in Bosnia and Herzegovina we have mostly several communities of Sephardic Jews coming as early as those in Dalmatia in the 16th century in the context of Ottoman expansion to southeastern Europe. And then after the occupation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have Ashkenazi Jews coming to Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. After the end of the First World War, we can see the dissolution of these big empires and making place to so-called nation states. Why so-called nation states? Because majority of these nation states were actually multinational states, and in some of them Jewish minority being defined only as religious community or national community was very significant, like in Poland, but in Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, the later called Kingdom of Yugoslavia, we can talk about a relatively small community, up to 0.5%. nationwide. While if we talk about the bigger communities in Croatia, we can talk about 6% of general population in Zagreb in its peak, or 8% in Osijek, which was in eastern Croatia, and it was the second largest. So it's really, these are really rather small and young communities. If we talk about them religiously, they are mostly neolog, which is a way of Hungarian reform. So we had this short interwar period where we had the combination of Ashkenazi Jews from former Austro-Hungary, mostly in Croatia and in what used to be southern Hungary and became northern Serbia, in parts of Slovenia. And then we have mostly Sephardic Jews in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as in Serbia. And I don't know if there is a pointer to be seen when we record. This was on the southern tip of Yugoslavia. We can see this kind of green, then with some kind of brownish. These were Macedonian Sephardic community that at that time was part of Serbia. So these Serbian Sephardic Jews were, for instance, very integrated by the end of the 19th century, beginning of 20th century, already acculturated into Serbian society, while, for instance, Macedonian Sephardic Jews are very traditional Sephardic Jews connected more to the Greece. War in Yugoslavia started in April 1941 when Germans, Italians, Hungarians and Bulgarians simultaneously attacked Yugoslavia, occupied it and partitioned. And on the part of the Croatian territory, together with the whole Bosnia and Herzegovina, the independent state of Croatia was proclaimed as a sort of officially it was allied state, but it was sort of puppet state / sort of occupation. If you see the line that is cutting it diagonally in some kind of blue line, it's a line that divides German influence and military occupation and Italian influence and military occupation. The independent state of Croatia paid for its occupation, sent the workers to Germany and so on. So what's on the other hand very important for the Jewish history and the story of survival is this line. The Italian zone, until its capitulation in September 1943, was some kind of, it offered much bigger chance for survival. The Jews were deported and murdered from summer of 1941 to summer of 1942, mostly in Croatian concentration camps. While after summer of 1942, these deportations went to, the Germans took over and they deported Jews mostly to German camps, to Nazi camps in occupied Poland, mostly to Auschwitz. The war ended in 8th of May, like in Europe. So the last part of the Yugoslavia was liberated only in May 8th, 1945. And we now have the new situation. We have the federation, Yugoslav Federation, made up of 6 republics, one of them being Croatia. If we talk about the Jewish history in Croatia, or in general in Yugoslavia, after 1941, there are different phases, different usually, because I'm in Judaic studies, I tend to see and to research Jewish history from within. Here it was a bit new position for me. I also try to analyze the attitude of the government. What's important to understand from the Jewish point of view is that the war didn't end in 8th of May 1945. This is when we have rehabilitation started. The Jews are coming back from camps, from German camps for Yugoslav army officers and soldiers, from hiding from Italy as refugees, usually finding no one at home and their property being looted. And now the really long period of rehabilitation started. We have the community efforts in this rehabilitation, renewal of their membership in different international Jewish organizations. Something that could be seen that is different is that the new communist Yugoslav government didn't allow them to renew their membership in World Zionist Organization. It's this attitude that the communists in Yugoslavia had even before the Second World War. The Zionists were, in a way, the enemy. It was so this was something that was not allowed, although the Zionist movement had its own Marxist stream within it. It was no-go. And we can see that in the beginning the community really put the effort in the rehabilitation of the Jewish population. They gave different kind of help. They opened the first shelters for the Jews coming back. The JDC, the Joint Jewish Distribution Committee, the biggest international Jewish organization, was sending material help. The Jewish community in Zagreb offered the first shelter for the returning Jews. And it's important to mention that the Jewish community of Zagreb was active throughout the war. It acted as coercive community during the war, where all those that were seen, that were defined racially, quote unquote, Jewish, were had to be members of the community and pay fees. With these fees, the community was sending help to Jews in concentration camps in the independent state of Croatia. Because of this, we have the archive of the community that survived, and on the other hand, we have the community that was active throughout the war, so right away they were able to start with different kind of help, even legal help, for the returning Jews. If we talk about the attitudes of the communist government, we have several points that I want to make. First, the Jews as victims, something that they were aware of, especially in a context where the international organization was documenting crimes against the Jews and the Yugoslavia joined these efforts. Then the Jews as fighters against fascism, those that were pre-war party members, Communist Party members, those that joined the fight or were on the partisan territory and became or not becoming the Communist Party members. However, this was the highest place somebody could be at. It was the fighter against fascism. And then we have attitudes toward the Jews in this either still war period but on liberated territories. It's something I make a distinction. Here I will further on not talk about the parts that were still under occupation. It's parts that were under control of national liberation movements. We can see then how the repatriation went. We saw Jews as being suspected as British spies. We can follow the very complicated process of property restitution, and then we can see the new government seeing Jews as part of bourgeoisie class. If we talk about the British spies, Jews as British spies, here again we need some wider context. From 1943, the British were one who were helping partisans the most, materially, in weapons and so on. However, we can see that already from the fall of 1944, the Communist Party returned to the stance from September of 1939 on British and French as the protagonist of imperialist wars. It's turned to the Soviets and being much more pro-Soviets, making it clear now when the war is coming to an end. And then in a lot of documents we can see the secret police already organized, so-called OZNA, that is looking for British spies. And following the archival documents, we can see a lot of these, the Jews being suspected as such, because they had contacts with British, they were sometimes translators, they knew languages, they were city dwellers, as this was their company in this liberated territory, and soon enough some of them were so-called quote-unquote liquidated or shot as British spies. We can see one of the sources saying that Risha Reknitzer from Osijek was liquidated because quote-unquote he held meetings with Jews in Kometnik and recorded the conclusions of the meeting. It had to do with the distribution of money to the Jews given by the English. He is suspected to be an intelligence service agent. And he was not the only one. We can see in not small a number of documents Jews as being either imprisoned or unfortunately shot as British spies. If we talk about the return of the Jews back home, not only Jews, everybody had to pass through screening. So in the beginning, there was this notion to repatriate or not. It was everybody's personal decision. There was an order to be repatriated or to lose the citizenship. To lose citizenship and that put themselves into statelessness, something that the Jews already had bad experiences with after the end of the First World War. Citizenship was also connected to property rights, and majority of the Jews, not all, but majority of Jews decided to repatriate and went through different screenings of a Yugoslav communist security agency, OZNA, mentioned already before. So they went through interviews, and then these personal characteristics were sent to Yugoslavia for potential use against the so-called suspicious elements who returned. And here we also have a lot of Jewish stories, about, again, suspicion, because if they were not joining the fight actively, why didn't they? The biggest OZNA headquarters outside of Yugoslavia as one that filtered the returnees was in Italy, where a lot of Jewish refugees were, and we can see a lot of different stories about Jews being suspected as royalists or as Anglophiles and so on. It's interesting, usually we say that after the war, after the racial laws, we don't see this kind of discrimination, but we can see suspicion for Jews as such in a lot of these documents. The special part that would require the whole lecture is the part of the property issues, something the Jews lost already in the period of the independent state of Croatia, throughout different set of legal decisions. Now in the beginning it looks like there will be restitution, because restitution did exist on paper. It was made in a way that the paper situation would be clear, that we go back to 6th of April 1941, and then this was like preparatory phase for the big nationalization. Something was returned, like one apartment. Sometimes they became trustees for their pre-war companies. They used to work for the company as managers, but didn't really get the ownership. And soon, actually, everything was nationalized. Not everything in a sense that if you had one apartment was not, or one family house, but this was about it. This would be the main processes, as I can say in 20 minutes and 30 seconds. We can later talk about how the Jews answered to this, and we can see that actually 2/3 of surviving Jews from 1944 to 1952 decided to leave. This is also, we have a lot of documents talking about their motives. So I would end symbolically with a speech on the boat to the land of Israel. And of course, because this is why I did specialize the post-war and not the Holocaust, I like to end positively. This is the wedding in one of these. It's signing the ketubah, the marriage agreement, on one of these boats to Israel. I would like to thank you all, and I missed a minute and a half. I hope this will not be a problem. I just hope I will not now destroy the lecture, and I hope to maybe answer some of the things I just touched and maybe didn't explain enough in our discussion. Thank you all.